Okay. We are good to go, Judge. I will call roll. The Honorable Sharon Keller. Mr. James Jim Bethke.
Here.
Mr. Jay Cohen.
Present.
Mr. Alex Bunnan.
Here.
Honorable Valerie Covey. Honorable Brendan Creighton. Honorable Richard Evans.
Here.
The Honorable Nathan Hecht. The Honorable Missy Maderi. The Honorable Joe Moody. The Honorable Sherry Reddick. The Honorable Reggie Smith. The Honorable Vivian Torres.
Here.
The Honorable James Woolley.
Here.
Judge, we have quorum.
Before I get started, I want to let you know that Scott Ellers is under the weather, so Bill Cox is going to submit for, proceed. Is there a motion to approve the minutes for the April 5th, 2024?
I'll make that motion.
All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. The only thing I'm not for is at the last meeting, I mentioned that you can want to elect the new chair of TIEC. You're not from there. So Judge Maderi has asked that if she becomes the chair, that I continue running meetings as long as I'm here. So that's what I'm gonna do today. But I just want to nominate Judge Maderi for chair. Don't really know the procedure here.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Congratulations. We are so happy Judge Maderi is willing to do this. She's great. And when I leave, I know I'll be leaving. All right.
Thank you.
That is the end of my report. Bill?
Thank you, Judge Keller.
Hold on.
It's been a busy quarter for TIDC. First item we want to highlight our new team member, Kenitra Brown, who comes to us from SMU's Dedman School of Law. She was with the Decent Center for Criminal Justice Reform, and before that, spent several years in private practice, working on civil, criminal, and family protection representation cases, as well as post-conviction work. Kenitra has her BA in political science, policy studies, and religious studies from Rice, and her JD from SMU. And she's going to be splitting the time between the policy team and improvement teams, doing policy monitoring and improvement projects. We've also posted for our fiscal analyst position so that we can get some help for Deborah doing fiscal reviews. Those applications have come in and has closed. We'll be doing interviews in the near future. And then we are blessed to have 5 interns with us this summer from literally all over the state and the country. We've got James Comer, who's a rising 2L at Baylor, originally from San Antonio. Audrey Dixon, a rising 3L at St. Mary's. Natalie Essex, a rising 2L at Washington and Lee, and is from Port Arthur. Emma Hoffman, who's a rising 3L at UT Law, who was born and raised in Dallas. Tyler Smith, a rising 2L at SMU, who's an Amarillo native. And Jordan Murley, who's a rising 2L at UT Austin and worked with us during the first half of the summer. We've also started our legislative work groups, getting ready for the upcoming legislative session. Our criminal and juvenile work group and family protection work groups met at the end of May. Both of them were hybrid meetings. For criminal and juvenile, we had 34 stakeholders in attendance, both in person and virtually, which included 5 judges. Through the work group, we have 10 new proposals and 6 proposals that were previously adopted by the commission that were not passed last year that are being brought forward. And we'll have our next meeting of the criminal and juvenile work group on August 6th to finalize its proposals. And then we have 2 subgroups working on additional proposals to provide clarification and finalize the language before we bring them back to the large group and ultimately to the commission at the August meeting. Part of our work has been with the Managed Assigned Council directors who have met as an additional subgroup They've been looking at areas to improve the MAX statute to address some issues in the definition of MAX and access to records and other matters that MAX need to function effectively. And the capital representation work group that's working on issues dealing with the attorneys taking capital cases, ensuring sufficient attorneys to be able to provide effective representation and to address issues with the appointment of capital representation. They'll also be preparing recommendations to go back to the work group and ultimately to come before the commission. Crystal's been leading our family protection representation work group. Their initial meeting had 23 stakeholders in attendance in person and virtually, and are working on 9 proposals and are continuing to work with subgroups to have their proposals ready before their final meeting in August to bring their proposals before the commission. In addition, we're starting to work on our legislative appropriation request. We wanted to thank all of the members of the commission who were with us on Monday for our work session. And we'll be going through that in more detail as we look at exactly how the commission would like us to proceed as we draft the request to the legislature for the upcoming session on our projects to focus on and funding needed to carry out our mission in the next biennium. With that, could we go to the PowerPoint for the LAR?
Let me remind everybody that we're going to be voting on our priorities for the LAR. So this is not just information, this is that we need to know to vote.
And if we could go to the next slide, please, Kristen. As we go through the discussion this morning, we will obviously not be going through as much detail as we did on Monday, but just as a high-level roadmap, we're going to talk about the LAR process and decision points, a very brief review of the study PPRI did for us on rural public defense needs as requested by the legislature. Look at addressing the major issues that Texas is facing through our exceptional items on the LAR. Look at potential items for the FY 26-27 LAR exceptional items, and then go through the decision points. Next slide, please. On the LAR process, on odd numbered years, the state governmental entities, even numbered years, the state governmental entities submit legislative appropriation requests to the Legislative Budget Board for needs for the next 2 years. Later on the summer, we will receive what we anticipate receiving on our base budget, which typically is the level we are currently funded at. One item that may create some additional issues that require action for the commission is dealing with Operation Lone Star. This is the second biennium in which Operation Lone Star will be potentially in our base budget. Last session, the LBB included it, and if that's the case, we will not need to deal with an OLS request. If it isn't, we may need to make a request at the same level as our current funding, as we anticipate that would meet the needs, barring significant changes due to SB4 or other evolution on the OLS program. Next slide, please. We wanted to ask PPRI to give a brief review of their study on the rural needs assessment. And for that, I'm going to pass it over to George Nafal with the Public Policy Research Institute.
Good morning. My name is George Nafal, and I'm a lead researcher at the Public Policy Research Institute. And I'm presenting a very brief summary of the report that we did for the Indigent Defense Commission, Justice Beyond the Cities, the State of Public Defense in Texas. A quick background on the report is that we conducted a needs assessment of public defense across Texas. We focused on rural counties. The way we defined rural counties was a county with a population less than 100,000. That meant we had 214 counties that qualified as rural counties. Even with that qualification, there were a lot of differences across the state, as that figure shows, where you have counties with 5,000 and less, between 5,000 and 25, 25,000 and 50, and so on and so forth. So there is a lot of, the distribution is not homogeneous. The method we approached this is through a mixed method where we did an online survey, supplemented it by the virtual interviews, and we also supplemented that by macro level data to look at trends. For the online survey, we conducted a survey between October of 2023 to February of 2024. We were able to reach a good number of positions. In fact, across all counties, rural counties, we were able to reach every county except 3, Brooks, Lamar, and Loving. We had more than 700 completed responses. 431 of them came from those rural counties. We felt very comfortable with the level of representation as this figure shows. We were able to talk to everybody, all stakeholders across those counties. At the end of the survey, we asked if the respondents are interested in a virtual interview, and we scheduled 48 and completed 48. About 21 of them comes from rural counties. What we found is a very clear, finding is there is an attorney availability crisis. In fact, that's the only thing that the stakeholders we talked to wanted to talk about, and that was true across rural and non-rural counties. The 3 things that became very clear. The number of attorneys taking on indigent defense cases is declining, and it's declining rapidly. That happened in the last 8 years. Between 2014 and 2022, the decline is about 27%, which is about 500 attorneys. That's for the rural counties. And the second finding is that current attorneys taking those indigent defense cases are older. Very few of them are in their 30s and 40s. And those who are taking those cases are overburdened. 1 out of 4 are overburdened based on the guidelines across the state. Based on those findings, we recommended 6 recommendations that we believe should be pursued. The first one is develop a comprehensive program to increase the number of attorneys. That's going to be based on a collaboration between TIDC, law schools, public defender officers, and go in the field and recruit, build, allow opportunities for future law school students to be involved. The second recommendation is TIDC will need $23.5 million per year to establish and operate new regional PD offices, covering 1/3 of the rural counties that do not have a PD office today. The report that was shared with you has some of the information, how that number was calculated. I'll be happy to answer any questions. Third is perform a comprehensive analysis of court-appointed fees and motivations to take on indigent defense cases. That's the first step that judges do whenever they realize that they need an attorney, is to increase the fees, and a more comprehensive analysis is needed. Number 4, TIDC should embark on an outreach campaign targeting rural counties and rural communities. That allows to build trust, to build engagement, and to allow TIDC to be at the forefront of issues related to indigent defense. Number 5, as much as possible, ensure that all current PD offices have sustainable funding. That allows to address potential crowding out of private attorneys in communities where a PD office is present. Last is to establish a regional TIDC offices to better serve the state's needs, similar to what other state agencies have currently. Thank you.
While we have George with us, does the commission have any questions for him? Thank you, George. If we could go back to thank you, Christy. Continuing on with the LAR discussion on our next slide, we have a list of the major areas that we wanted to bring to the commission for consideration. As we discussed Monday, there are significant shortfalls in the fair defense account, which need more reliable sources of revenue. The legislature added family protection representation to our area of responsibility in the last session. However, funding was not included with that added mandate. And so we need to explore how the commission would like to seek funding and at what amounts. There also, as we just heard from the rural report, major shortages of defense attorneys taking public defense cases. and criminal, juvenile, and family protection representation in rural Texas and also in non-rural Texas, and what potential strategies we could use to address those challenges. And meeting all of these needs, we have TIDC staffing needs, both for family protection representation and recruiting efforts, and then, as I mentioned earlier, potentially Operation Lone Star. Next slide, please. Before we go through each of the detailed areas we had identified for the commission, we wanted to provide a quick summary. The potential funding to address the shortfall would be approximately $12 million. We have multiple options for the commission to consider on dealing with family protection representation, be it full funding for the current cost to counties, half funding, 37% funding, which would be roughly what the state spends for court-appointed special advocates, or is there another option that the commission wants to consider? Judge?
Not everybody was at the meeting on Monday. Are you gonna go into where the shortfall?
We are.
Okay.
We're gonna go through each one. I just want to provide a little bit of context first. Addressing the attorney shortages. We've identified a number of potential options, from internships, which could be funded at approximately $960,000 for the biennium, fellowships funded at approximately $2.7 million, or student loan repayment and scholarships that would be approximately $5 million to bring additional attorneys. Yes, $5 billion would bring in a lot more attorneys. The fourth area is if we want to look at increasing our capacity to build and expand public defenders' offices, looking at both what we just heard from PPRI and adding additional capacity to deal with limited tax bases in some communities, deal with growth in our existing programs, just the fiscal pressures. We had estimated that might be a $35 million ask. And then looking at additional employees for family protection and public defense would be approximately $1.3 million for the biennium. However, that would be included in either our family protection ask or our additional funding ask to make us whole dealing with the current fair defense account. And then also potentially Operation Lone Star. Next slide, please. And then Judge Keller, as you were asking about, we've got the details for each item. The first one being dealing with the fair defense account. We could go to the next slide, please. We've got a summary of our funding and the sources and where our challenge arises. The legislature appropriates funds to both TIDC and the Office of Forensic and Capital Writs. And that funding for both comes from the Fair Defense account. The Fair Defense account, our Fund 5073, is funded from a combination of sources, one being court costs that come in from criminal cases, and also from juror pay. Excess funds go over and add to that fund. Traditionally, that has been approximately $6 million per year. Juror pay has not been having that excess funding to come over and support the Fair Defense account, which has led to part of our deficit, in addition to those court costs being lower than normal during the current biennium. As a result, we're predicting a potential shortfall at current levels of $5.8 million for this fiscal year and $5.2 million for next fiscal year, a total of $11.1 million. To address this, if we were to make a request, we would recommend that be in the amount of $12 million to make up the loss of the juror pay and provide us the resources we need to continue our mission on the criminal and juvenile work. Next slide, please. Crystal, would you give us a summary on the family protection areas?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Can we have the next slide? Okay. So I cut the presentation down a bit. I know we don't have a ton of time to cover this, but I will give you a bit of background. So as I'm sure all of you remember, we started collecting data 3 years ago to better understand what's happening in family protection representation. And just for those that are very new, that basically means court-appointed representation of children and indigent parents who are involved in lawsuits brought by the Department of Family and Protective Services against the parents alleging child abuse or neglect. So what we've learned over the last 3 years, we've learned a lot about spending. So the slide here will show you generally what we've been spending over the last 3 years. Fiscal year 21 came in with the most spending, that's just over $66 million. And then the next year we collected data, the numbers did drop a bit. And then this year in fiscal year 23, the counties reported spending just over $61.7 million for this representation. When we look at the biennium spending for the last 2 years, that's coming in at over $123 million that the counties are spending, with a 3-year average of just over 63 million. Do you want to add that this is completely funded by the counties at this point? There's no state funding at this point to support the work. There is some Title IV-E money available, but that is being underutilized. Generally, the number of counties that are receiving those federal funds hovers at around 20. So right now, the lion's share of the burden for this work is being put onto the counties, and this is statutorily required. It's in the family code that children and indigent parents have a right to an attorney in these cases. And so this is what we're looking at. Next slide. Okay, so we've put together 3 different options for y'all to consider. The state has never funded this work, so this is, frankly, this is a really big deal. Everyone who works in child welfare is really excited about this, and so you get to be part of something that I think is really kind of like pioneering for our state. So one option would be a full match. Just match what the counties are spending, match that. That'll come up to 61.7 million per year, and for a biennium, it's going to be just over 123 million. Another option that we considered was, let's just split it down the middle. Let's do a 50% match, which would come out to 30.85 million a year, and then just over 61.7 million for the biennium. And then a third option would be to match what Texas CASA gets for funding. So just to give you a short background, when a child is in a lawsuit alleging abuse or neglect, and DFPS, the department, wants conservatorship of a child, that child has to have both an attorney ad litem, so a licensed lawyer who can do lawyer things, and a guardian ad litem. Guardian ad litems do not have to be lawyers. You can have people serve in the dual role. So a lot of times little kids, babies, toddlers will have an attorney who's serving as both attorney and guardian ad litem. But then there are going to be times when that's not possible because the roles are different. Attorney ad litems are required to represent their client just as any other lawyer would, follow directives of their client. A guardian ad litem is supposed to represent the best interest of the child, which, as you can imagine, particularly with teenagers, may not always match each other. Sometimes teens don't always want what's possibly best for them. So sometimes you'll have to have 2 people serving that child. So Texas CASA comes in and serves in that guardian ad litem role. Again, they're not attorneys. If it is an attorney, it's just because some lawyer wanted to volunteer. Most of the people serving as CASAs are volunteers. Texas CASA is the overarching body of that organization. So each county, not every county, but many counties then have their own county Texas CASA organization. Texas CASA serves 219 counties. They're not serving the whole state. They don't serve every child, and they don't serve any parents. But even looking at their role, that's not covering the whole state's need, their yearly budget is over $45 million. And they do get state funding. It comes through HHSC, and they last year got 22.83 million from the state, which roughly comes out to about 37% of their budget. So our third option would be to, at the very least, match what Texas CASA is getting, and kind of start maybe leveling the playing field there so that the counties can get some support. We can fill the deep need. There is a deep need for supporting the work. The lawyers, as been mentioned, we're losing a lot of attorneys. We don't have enough people to fill these roles, and it's very important. So we do think that option 3 is sort of the floor of what we should be considering at this point. So what are we going to do with this money? We're going to help cute kids, obviously. We think that the way TIDC has been working is great. So we want to follow a similar model. We'd like to do some formula grants out to the counties, so just get some percentage out, just start doing some basic help for the counties. We also want to do some improvement grants, start some system building, maybe building some offices or adding divisions to existing public defenders that may be interested. There have been statutes in the family code for well over 10 years that we can have offices of parent representation, offices of child representation. We can have manager assigned counsels that do the work. Right now, we only have one office of parent representation in Travis County and one office of child representation in Travis County. Part of that, I think, is because we just haven't had funds to do it. We haven't really had anyone who can help counties build these offices like TIDC does for criminal and juvenile. So we're really hopeful that we can use the laws that already are there with some funding and support from us, and we can start building things up. I will add, any improvement grants we do, we would like to be able to consider doing pre-petition work. This is something that's very, it's a hot topic in child welfare. It's a nationwide movement. Even within our state, people are very interested in this. Parents do not have a right to an attorney before a CPS case is filed, but there is a lot of movement to start giving parents attorneys earlier so that we can maybe get ahead of a problem before children end up in long-term foster care. A lot of the statutes that have been passed have been looking more at the front end of CPS work and trying to minimize some of the damage that happens after a court case gets filed. So ideally, if we're going to build systems, we want to build smart ones, efficient ones, and start thinking about including pre-petition work as well to get in front of a problem and hopefully minimize costs and damage to families and communities. And of course, to do all this cool stuff, we're going to need staff. Right now, it's myself. We have Natalie Corvington, who's amazing, but she's, partially doing the work. If we are going to get this money, build systems and do support, we are going to need some staff that we'll discuss later on. So that is my portion, unless anyone has questions.
How long is it gonna take you to do that? If we ask for it and see what you're asking for the legislature. How would you be able to split with the second, what is it, how much, 37% of 60, 67, 63.
37% would be 22.8 million a year, or 45 for the biennium.
Even formula grant, maybe I'm wrong on that. But I thought of something, and I haven't talked to you about it, but I just did that till late. But as I mentioned on Monday, Family Rep and Kimberly Defense are going to be competing with each other for money.
Right.
And I don't want either one to be short. But it occurred to me that maybe we should match what we're asking for Family Rep with what we're asking for Federal Funds for the region, which would be all around 18%. It's not near as much money, but I don't want going forward for us to start having this battle in criminal defense and Family Rep. And that's one way that might make it fair. And maybe Family Rep needs more, but our whole budget OLS during the current plan is what, 37 million?
That sounds right. Then.
So we're asking for
The 37% would be 45 million for the biennium.
so for 1 year it'd be 22. That is a big, that's a big part compared to what we're using. And I haven't thought this through, and I haven't really talked to anybody that mentioned build it right. But and maybe we should ask for it all, and maybe not there. There are a lot of things to consider, but I just wanted to throw that out there that we want to be.
I completely agree, and I certainly don't want to be in a situation where we're taking one from the other. I do think there's ways to maybe, do economies of scale and get the systems to work better together as opposed to compete with one another, because we are serving the same communities. I don't know that there's a concern with not being able to spend it. I mean, I actually know that there's a program right now that applied to TAJF. It would be 10 million for the biennium, and they didn't get the money. So there's one that wants a program right now. We have a program that's out of McLennan County. It was a pre-petition project. It was not funded for a lot, and they folded because they didn't have any money. They would probably pop right back up if they had some support. So I know that there are people out there who want to do the work. There's no money to do any of it is the real issue.
And maybe we could put money at the beginning to get it established.
Right, right.
And, yeah, because I don't want to not put enough money that doesn't succeed.
Right.
And maybe that's something, maybe that's the overriding consideration. If we fund it well enough, try to make it well enough at the beginning, that we can go forward on it. But anyway, I just wanted to mention.
Right.
Thanks.
Judge, did you want to go through the items so far, or do you want to continue to the overview?
I would go on comment, Judge Kilbright. I concur. The one thing that we might want to consider is the full funding, or at least having a policy statement on requesting full funding for both on the criminal addiction defense and this. I don't anticipate that happening. However, you know, there is precedent. There was when Chairman Andy Murr was here, and then we put together like a 6-year, you know, strategy. So we could, and Judge Evans in the call said, we ought to show what the deficiencies are. So at least raising that, whether or not we ask for it in reference to this, I would be good with whatever the commission decides to go forward. But I do know, or at least I'm thinking, I don't think there's regulations right now. And what would concern me is if we fund, you know, one of my former jurisdictions, Harris County, when we start looking at caseloads, I would think that we would want to think about some substantive changes to go along with this. With the Fair Defense Act, when it passed, there was like 3 or 4 requirements. So I would be a little hesitant to recommend funding without there being some type of regulation or guidance. Judge,
You just listening right now and wanted to hear what everybody's saying. You know, we all discussed this on Mondays and trying to see the other, Judge Molly was chatting with us on it. Anybody else?
But let me just relay a request from staff. If everybody will please speak up. Apparently on the YouTube feed, the mics are having a hard time catching everybody.
It's a matter of policy. I've never been asked for full funding. I'm not sure I'm in there. On one hand, got the idea that that's what it costs, and you know, that for a bit. We want to do spending. Because otherwise they're not encouraged to. But these are hard questions. And we're already having short, so Bill said, what we want to do is one at a time.
And I realize we've already covered several, Judge. I apologize, but I
No,
think
that's
this
fine.
is the first one that has significant decision points.
Why don't we do this? I think the consensus on Monday was that our first exceptional item should be for. Does anybody want to put that part in? Has anybody do need?
I think that, yeah.
Okay, I think we can push it. So let's go ahead and do that first.
It is gonna be a lot of places. We have to go through it. So why don't we do it all of it?
Moving to the third area, I'd like Kristen to go through and outline the 3 areas we've identified. There's a staffing request as well, but in terms of dealing with our challenges on recruitment in rural and urban areas, we've got 3 strategies for addressing those. Kristen Meeks.
Hi, everyone. So really quick, we've got attorney availability first. George mentioned, full report, y'all can review as well. Some of the things we mentioned in the meeting on Monday, that crisis is happening across the state, but it's really particularly in the more remote communities. And so with that, that's kind of where our focus for these ads for today. The first task we have, and we're trying to kind of go chronologically with how you get into a writing. Thank you so much. We're gonna start with when you are a law student, how do we introduce you to this work? One of the best ways to introduce you to doing this type of work, as well as to start building ties in those more rural communities, is going to be through internship programs. Over the summer, I'm sure many of you were familiar with y'all with internships back in the day. But that's a really good way to get people out there. And one of the things that's really difficult is that all of our 10 law schools here in Texas are all in big metros. So none of them are in those rural communities where the Sun District is. And so it's really difficult for students to move out there. They have to somehow make their way, find housing, as well as support themselves financially when moving out to these rural communities. And so what we're looking for is to be able to support those students as they're moving out to those communities. So that's going to be a $960,000 for the biennium that would support law students in all of our rural regional offices, at least 2 per summit. That's kind of the intent on this one, is to get them out there, have them building those relationships and communities with those offices to encourage them to continue to practice out there. The next piece of this ask would be for fellowships. Fellowships really address that time once you graduate law school, but you're not a lawyer yet, you got to pass the bar, and that first year's kind of weird, frankly. It's a little odd. You don't always get hired on. A lot of limitations around how you're employed occur at that time because you're not a lawyer. So sometimes they're like, well, we can't really hire you yet. We can't afford to put you up until you pass the bar. That's what this program is about. It's about filling that gap and really helping folks to be able to have a connection, have an office, have a job lined up, and fill that kind of gap in that intern. So this asks us for 2.7 for the biennium. That would support 15 one-year fellowship programs, which would then enroll those students, those graduates that turn into lawyers into full-time positions as public defenders. And the third part of that ask is going to be talking about how do you keep people in the work and also incentivize people in a different way to get into doing this type of work. One thing that is an example right here in Texas is student loan repayment programs. Texas funds student loan repayment programs for a variety of different high-need occupations in very specific areas. So areas that have these professional shortages, that's where you see these programs really activating. One example of this is going to be physicians. Just like lawyers, doctors also come out with quite a bit of student loan debt. That's kind of one of those ways we get physicians in these more rural communities as well. What would a program like that look like? It incentivizes 4-year commitments. So what happens is these attorneys would be committing, saying, hey, I'm going to do 4 years. After 1 year of service, they would get part of their student loan repayment back, and then they would the next year reapply, get another set back and back after that year of service. So it's a guaranteed kind of commitment in that way. And this would be, we're asking for $5 million in the biennium. This would be here in Texas, we have the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board. They are the ones who implement kind of all these different programs, whether they're loan repayment, scholarships, those types of things. We've been in conversations with them, and we've heard we have both loan repayment and scholarship programs on the slide today. We presented those to you on Monday. We've heard that the loan repayment program is easier to implement. So it probably would be the way I would name this making the choice. But that's kind of our third ask here on recruitment. And I'm going to turn it back to Bill and if you have any questions.
Thank you, Kristen. One other item that we got from the higher ed board is, in addition to loan repayment being easier to administer, it's more effective, and that we would need to include the ask in our LAR as well to move that forward. Moving to our fourth area is specifically dealing with the recommendations from the Rural Public Defense Study and also dealing with the other realities of improving public defense across the state, which would be a $35 million ask for building new public defenders offices, new managed assigned counsel systems. Focused on rural areas would be approximately, next slide, please, $23.5 million a year. And that would cover the third of counties that when they were surveyed by PPRI, rural counties literally across the board, we had a third, and a third. A third said we would like a public defender's office now if the funding and resources were available. A third said we're interested, and a third did not want to pursue one at this point. So that would deal with the initial third who said they would like to come on board. We anticipate that that could be set up over 2 years, looking at the number of offices that we have built over the last few years and the rapid expansions we've seen, including our new offices in the High Plains and Crossroads at the Coastal Plains in Victoria. We've already had some counties expressing interest in joining on to those as well.
I'm sorry, is the 35 million then for the 1/3?
It would be the 1/3 plus dealing with helping some of the mid-sized counties to meet their needs, and also dealing with some of the other challenges we've heard repeatedly from counties across the state, that our sustainability works well for some rural counties, but some are at the point where they have reached their maximum ad valorem rate. They can't raise any additional funding without cutting other programs. And so they need a higher level of funding to make public defender's offices or managed assigned counsel something that frankly is a fiscal option for them. And one item on this, I'll go ahead and mention at this point, however, it goes toward both our grants discussion and the data website update. Following from the grants reporting committee meeting on Monday, our Director of Data Research, Sarah Gamble, reached out to PPRI and talked about could they expand their work on the rural, so look at county tax bases and see what kind of guidance we could get for the commission on looking at, is the sustainability model currently tuned correctly? Should we look at some other options? And she believes she could have a presentation for the board on at least areas that could be explored by August. And then if the board wants to continue with that, a potential framework by December for the next request for applications. And so dealing with all of these, we think potentially would be a $35 million ask for the biennium. Next slide, please. And then the other than Operation Lone Star, which we've already talked about, the other potential ask is additional staffing. And Crystal, could you give us a quick summary on the family protection staffing?
Sure. So the total requested staff we would be asking for if we were to get some type of funding to support the work would be 5 additional FTEs. They're listed up here. The estimated cost for all 5 of those would be just over $540,000 a year. It's an estimated cost. One staff person we would like to be fully dedicated to doing Title IV work. As I mentioned earlier, those federal funds are being greatly underutilized, and we do think that we have the ability to create a more efficient and better system so that we can maximize the use of those funds. I'll talk about it a little more in my report later, but we have been working with the Department of Family and Protective Services to reach an agreement with them so that we can provide administrative supports to them and maximize the use of those funds. I think we're going to get there. The talks have been very positive, but to really get every dollar we can out of it and to get every county possible in that system, we really do need one person to kind of work on it, build the machine, work with everybody and get that running. We think it would be someone who's like a grant specialist in that type of role. Additionally, we would like another grant specialist to work on the formula grants, those school improvement grants we hopefully will get to do in the future. We would like an additional fiscal monitor, because if we're going to be giving people money, like you mentioned, Jen, we want to make sure that rules are being followed, the laws are being followed, people are doing good things with that money. Deborah can't do it by herself. So we would like another fiscal monitor. And then we would like to do robust policy monitoring like we do for criminal and juvenile. We're not doing any kind of policy monitoring right now because we don't have any funds to give the counties. But if we were going to give the county state funds, we want to go out and do real policy monitoring and again, make sure that those funds are being used according to law and wisely and efficiently. So we would need 2 additional.
Do you know how much money is being left on the table from the Title IV?
So it's an estimate, but we estimate between $8 to $10 million every year. The money has been available since 2017. So we've been going every year, just kind of leaving it sitting there. So it is adding up each year that passes.
Thank you, Crystal. And then for the traditional PIDC side, Kristen has been leading our work on recruitment. She's done an incredible amount of outreach with law schools. However, one thing we have seen, because that's been just part of the work she does, is that we really need a full-time position to focus just on the recruitment and retention piece. With the ongoing work with law schools, reaching out to public defender offices, reaching out to managed assigned counsel, and reaching out to bar associations, and going beyond just the borders of Texas. We have a number of public defenders offices that recruit from our law schools, and we are losing attorneys who are interested in doing public defense work to go to other states. And we need to reach out to other law schools and show them what we have to offer in Texas and bring those attorneys who are interested in doing public defense work in to meet the needs of our state and meet our constitutionally mandated requirements. And then I think we've already covered Operation Lone Star. So if we could just go to the summary slide to work through and answer any questions the commission may have off where you'd like to go.
So the jury. Number two, I think this looks like a proposal from the staff in this order and based on this conversation on Monday. right?
Correct, Judge.
I think we need to ask for voting. Especially if somebody else is the way to know it. No. Okay, well, the question is, how much? And we got idea out of it, pretty too much, but, I don't want the counties to come to rely on us for a formula grant when they're not competitive in the future. I do want, there being money to get program established. I don't know where that is. So what do y'all?
What we discussed there with that, try to negotiate. What we asked. Like, if we ask for 50%, make it 30.
Oh, we aren't guaranteed to get in.
Right.
So, it sounds to me like we should not be too conservative.
Okay.
This.
Don't be
So
concerned.
I think the comment about the county needs to have some skin in the game.
Flush with
It's your constitutional right.
So what is the difference between, how much skin the county can have in at the 23 million versus the 50 million or whatever, I don't have the numbers.
If I could maybe add, and I don't know that I made this clear enough. What we have reported is what the counties have reported spending, but there are a lot of counties that they're just not spending enough. And that might be because they don't have it, right? We have the issues that you see in criminal public defense are exactly the same in this space. It's publicly funded. So when we're thinking about, if we were just to think, oh, we're just going to supplement what the county spends, that's not going to be enough to support the work because there are definitely counties that I would strongly argue are underspending, which then leads to not having enough attorneys or not having quality attorneys. When you look at the spending through the state, there is a very significant range in what's being spent per capita, or per child in conservatorship, which affects the quality of what children and families are getting. So, I would just urge you to consider that when you're thinking about how much you're going to ask for, that I don't think we're spending enough right now. Right.
So how does that work? So if we establish guidelines, but they don't give enough money. And so they're in a situation where that just happens. Okay.
Like instead of formula grant, they might be flat.
Right.
I have a similar comment about baseline, as you can, fund if they're already spending this much money. The planning, I just throwing it out there, each one. I just worry, if the county's already spending 61 million.
And I appreciate you bringing it up, Deborah. Let me provide a little bit of context for some of the newer members of the commission. When the formula grants were originally created, the formula looked at the amount county spend above the baseline that was established when the first set of data was collected by TIDC, I believe, in 2002, and looked at a split between county population and the county's expenses over that baseline, and then reimbursed a percentage of expenses based on that.
If we expand the statute, then there's a plan. And it was 91 million statewide in the first year. And so the planning was a real issue back then. Now so much money is being spent, not really an issue. Back then it was. So that is good.
I'm sorry.
I don't feel like I put-
I would also add, Jim, to mention your concern. There are some laws already in the family code about what's required. I mean, they're not robust, but there are rules about what attorney ad litem for parents and children are required to do. There are rules about COE that you have to have beforehand. There are rules about when people are supposed to get attorneys. So there are things that counties are supposed to be doing right now. So even if we don't create a bunch of new standards, there are things that we can look at and ensure that the counties are following when they're providing families these services.
Right now.
Correct.
And the other part, Crystal, from your studies you've done the last 2 years, there are a lot of counties from a fiscal standpoint that haven't been able to, so that is not being met currently.
That's correct. There are some counties that although they may know that this parent has a right to an attorney, maybe they don't have a person who can step up. And so they don't have enough resources to fulfill the statutory duties that they have.
Which is that, this is just what we're gonna ask.
No,
Not spending. Yeah.
and like you were asking, Commissioner Cohen, it's a matter of, we do the request, the legislative budget board analyzes it, the House does their recommended budget, the Senate does theirs, then it goes to conference committee. I would think, I'm like Crystal, at the very least, we do the amount that CASA's receiving, when that's just a ad litem. That's not mandated representation to effectuate due process and the essential rights. We have children in care at this point that DPS is, in effect, their parent. The parents' rights have been terminated, that no longer have an attorney representing their rights and their concerns because they're not required to do it correctly.
Let's go with that. So the proposed.
Yeah, it has kind of a logic to it as opposed to it costs this amount of money, but we just want half of it.
Yeah, I think what. And there would be to percentage. But that sounds fine. to me. No, this is just.
What I was gonna suggest we do have on the motion.
We can't hear about half what's going on.
Oh, okay.
That's right.
Well, what's been proposed is that we ask for the same amount as cost received, which is 37%.
Yes.
37%, it would be 45.6 million for the
For
biennial.
the what do you say?
You were asking if we needed a motion, and we do have on the motion sheet, motion 3, a list. What I would suggest if we work through and reach where the commission would like to go, and then we can do a single motion that would cover all of them. And the other item, just to clarify, looking at the language on 6 dealing with Operation Lone Star, I talked about it, but we probably should have included on the recommended language to include that if it's not included in our base budget.
So do we run the risk of asking for the smallest amount and then having that cut down, and then instead asking for the middle one and then having that cut down? I mean, think of when you're, right? I mean, I always ask for a, midnight curfew, and mom would come back at 10, I'm, all right, what about I was a lawyer since I was like that.
I like the idea of going at least with the middle, because when you think about it, CASA, they're not lawyers. So they're not really getting paid like the lawyers are by the counties. And I think it would justify a greater amount, at least 50%, the 50% amount, 6175. And they may shoot that down, but I think it's worth the ask.
Yeah, I mean.
If I might,
We're
I may
balancing,
interject something.
yes, please.
The, and Monday I share my views, but the legislature, our job is to make sure we have representation for people in Texas, right? The legislature needs to realize the effect of what they pass. They need to know what the bill is. And if
Good
they,
luck.
if they don't want to fund it, that's fine. But, I'm doing a county budget now. My formula grant is embarrassing what I get for indigent defense. So they need to understand that their good idea is causing us to raise over 80% of what it costs by local property taxes, and they're telling us to reduce taxes, and we're capped. I mean, their good ideas we're paying for. They want to drive a Cadillac and have us paid for it, and that's fine. But it's I've been doing this for almost 28 years, and the legislature, in my opinion, needs to understand what it costs to implement their good ideas. And they're good ideas. I'm not saying that, but they need, I've never gotten more than I ask for. So I think if you ask for more and get less is what we normally get from our people in Austin. But I think they need to know what it costs. If we're not going to ask for the full amount, we need to put a footnote, in my opinion, that says, look, we're asking for this. We still have a shortfall of whatever it is. And by the way, the regular initial charge of the commission was funded by 12 or 13% by the state, and the counties are funding the rest of it. But I think they need to understand that. And it's unfortunate we don't have more people on this meeting that might be voting on bills, but they need to understand that they talk about reduce the taxes and then they send us another job and no money. So I don't know. I'm just to the point I'm very frustrated with our state government, to say the least, but they need to know what it costs. That's my opinion.
I think that's a good point. Do we want to structure our exceptional items so that, the bottom line is, we're not gonna get it all. So what do we want to prioritize and by how much? If we just ask for all the money we need for family revit for some of the expense, we're gonna get some of it, we're not gonna get all of it. So what do we want to tell the legislature is most important? And that's all we're doing here. We're trying to line up the order of our session. And Gary's going to be presenting it to the legislature. Scott, so what do you think? We didn't know that part of it. So Scott can do it once.
I'm not here, it's sign everything.
Yeah.
Just to address Judge Evans' concern, when we prepare the LAR, it will be in much more detail than this. We can absolutely include the total costs the counties are absorbing right now as part of the reason we're making the request.
To the extent we know what they're actually.
Crystal has been, while we haven't had funding even before Family Rep was part of our mandate, Crystal has been working with counties. We've gotten the annual reports on their expenditures for Family Rep for 2 years.
So did you not just say some of them were not reporting?
No,
They're not
they're
spending.
underspending,
Yeah.
I think. We know what counties have spent for the last 3 fiscal years. Right, but if you look at just a spreadsheet of what counties are spending, there's a significant variation in how much the counties are spending.
Well, I think we have 2 proposals now, maybe more, but one is the 61 million for the biennium, roughly 145 million for the biennium. Either way, what do you all want to do? Let's say who wants to do the 61 million for the biennium?
Or ask also, what's the downside of the 60? What's the downside of the 45?
The downside is that they give it to the family grant, but don't throw the 12 million yet. Or they don't give us money for public defense, and they don't give us money for recruiting.
Right, so maybe it is not, and maybe if we do also with a little legislative footnote, is to be able to say our number one priority is the 12 million.
Yeah.
And then from there on, I know that's what we're trying to do, But I agree with Judge Keller on that. What makes me nervous about asking for the 61, right, negotiating the curfew, is that we take it away from something else and that we don't get it. And so, I mean, who is for the 45 at this time and who is for the 61? Yeah, we're not gonna get it. But what do you think the best, what's the time? Okay. I mean, I think you got great points, so I think the 45 is good, but I know that Judge Flores, thinking something. I am fine with the 45, I don't want to rock Peter to pay Paul, so I'm good with the 45.
As far as the legislature goes, where do you think that they would be less inclined to give us money? What area? I think it would be with personnel, because they like to squeeze. So I think if you're gonna sacrifice something, they're gonna end up cutting us on our request for 6 additional TIDC employees. But I mean, I'll go with the 45 if that's what everybody wants to do. It is better than nothing, which is what we have gotten for the counties since the beginning of this of representation. It's better than nothing.
Let's go with that and move on to the next priority. We have 3 ways that we can try to, I think this is really important too. I think that we need to have a program that tries to fix the attorney shortage, especially in rural counties, instead of just giving them more money. And I think this is a great idea. And thanks, we all mentioned, want to pick 1, 2, or 3 of these. Student loan repayment obligates people to work well, and that's what we want to do. And I think there was some report that showed that once people actually move to rural counties and start practicing there, they stay because they realize that they all need to be in rural county.
Well, and they put their roots in, right?
Yeah.
They'd be putting softball and ball range.
So again, it's a question of what do we want to ask for, what do we want to do, the active involved, the active, what do you all?
But the consistent.
Back to not hearing.
In the 2 short meetings that I've been with y'all, there is a consistent discussion about lack of return. And even getting these things implemented, like you said, in the counties that are the family representation, they're not getting it because they don't have an attorney to do it. I think we do all 3 of them.
I'd be okay with all 3.
Until you prioritize.
I mean, it's a pipeline, right? I mean, that's the way it's formatted. So when you remove one piece, the entire structure doesn't function the way it's supposed to function. So it's hard to I think you'd work backwards, right? You want someone, I think the loan forgiveness stuff sounds if you have to prioritize it, probably where you go. It's a construct that has been, like Kristen talked about, that's a construct that the legislature is used to talking about, something that they're used to funding. And so that's not something that's new. I mean, none of these concepts are new, but I'm saying that is something that we do encourage, we use as an incentive. So it's not something that sits outside of current philosophy around professionals and bringing them to regions where they're lacking. And quite honestly, they're lacking in a lot of places where people wouldn't think they're lacking. I mean, we found that when we did mental health work and substance use work in the 2015, 2017 session. That's where a lot of these concepts started to be pushed forward and funded, because I think a lot of folks in urban areas said, oh, well, this is really someone else's problem. But when you dove into the data, there was inner city Houston that had these issues. There was inner city Dallas that has these. I mean, so it was something that it was a problem for everybody, and you didn't really realize that until you really peeled back the layers. So, I mean, if you have to prioritize, it might work backwards from there, but separating them out or nixing one of them, I think would kind of disrupt the idea that you need the pipeline to fill these positions. So.
And just one other thing.
I'll vote for it in the legislature, by the way.
We appreciate
I agree with the judge, by the way. I hope people need to listen to the judge's comments about paying attention to our wonderful ideas and these, and I was kind of whispering here next to me, but like, we're talking about legal rights. You're talking about constitutional rights. You're not talking about frivolous programs. You were talking about rights that people have pursuant to our laws. And are we going to make sure that those are respected? We do that in spades in other areas. But when we're talking about poor people in these situations, we're always looking, and it's sad that we're like, well, it's better than nothing. That shouldn't, I mean, it is the position that we're in, and I get that, and that's a reality. I'm not ignoring that. I've been in the legislature long enough to know that that's how these things get prioritized, but we do need to talk about them as rights. These are rights, and we are trying to make sure that those rights are respected, and that we're fulfilling our obligations so that people are able to have those rights in place. They mean nothing if you don't have the representation. They mean nothing. And we all know that at this table, but we need to talk about it in those terms. And so I think it's one of those things. We are flush with cash in this state. When not a day goes by that we don't hear about the Texas Miracle and that, and the funds that are available and all of the great things that we can do in this state. But it goes back to, at least my faith formation. What do you do for the least of us? What are we doing for those that have nothing? And that is a message that we have to continue to talk about. I'm preaching to the choir at this table, but we have to take that out there. It is sad. It is sad that we have to get to a place where we go, well, that's better than nothing. That is not a reality that we should be living in. And so I think we should advocate, not in a Pollyannish way, but we should advocate in a way that speaks to these people's rights and to their dignity as human beings that are having to go through a myriad of difficult circumstances. And so, I am but one voice in that building, but it's something that we can advocate for. And this, you're not pulling a dollar amount out of the air either. And I think the thing that makes sense when you talk to appropriators or when you talk to LBB is make the number, like if the numbers are concrete and are tied to something, right? You're not just pulling it out of the air. And I think that's what this represents that. This is a very thoughtful analysis. I appreciate the work that's gone into this because this is a thoughtful analysis of how we can get to a better place. Is it where we need to be? No, but it is a better place than where we are today. And so
you would ask for all three.
I would ask for all three because it's a pipeline. And I would just say this is a pipeline to fill this gap. And I wouldn't, maybe you can talk about the three components of the same program, essentially. And it's hard for me to divvy them up. If I had to, I'd go to student loan forgiveness because those are the people at the very end of the pipeline, right? But they are, they're all critical to be able to fill that gap.
It's a good idea to try to get money for all of them and see which programs actually tend to work out. So I agree with you that student loan guarantees that we're going to have somebody working.
Yep. I mean, if you're going to triage them, that's where I would triage it, but I would group them in a way that says this is a program. This isn't the entirety of this is a program, and here's are the component pieces. So I mean, that's
And I know we're not at this point yet, but I would actually propose that be our second, so it ties in right after we're asking for the short one. So
It's a lot less money too.
it's less money, and it's when you're presenting it, you typically go through your exception items in order. So that way you're able to tell the story, then you transition over into this other area where we haven't printed.
Right. And I don't think the legislature is opposed to anything we're asking. I think they would be happy to fund it all if they had funded it. But yeah, I think maybe we should move it back in just and we can have it like just because it's considerably less money and
It touches part of the other. Saying
also like Representative Weaver's way of doing this, and the way that we're lining it out, right? I don't want the legislature to go, okay, well, we'll take A out, like you said, it's all kind of a thing.
Yeah.
So I think we should just make it as a top billing thing, and this is what it all. Yeah.
That sounds right. Do we want to, does anybody want to talk about asking for less than all three, or in the way that you're interested in? Do that, and we want to have a second, or prioritize everything. Next. $35 into a big public defense academy. Where do we put, well, we're not talking about where we put it. That's something we all want to explore. Yeah, I mean, I think we're trying to understand the main funding in rural defense. And this gives an opportunity. I mean, I don't think we ought to put the TNC employees way up high too, because we need somebody to help us on a lot of things. We need someone to coordinate recruitment at the very least. And that's adds up how much? We don't know.
It was, we did have an estimate on the slide, for the staffing component.
Judge, the total for family protection and the TIDC on the high end would be about 670,000. It'll probably be less than that, but we're figuring that if we were on the high end of placements, depending what employees are recruited.
It's also possible to include the staffing for each of these components that's associated with them in that exceptional item, as opposed to breaking it out as staffing increase as its own exceptional item. So that's something that they're having, because they don't realize the connection that's not together.
Or maybe put it as a little subheading under one of them, just move it completely and not make it its own half.
The conversations generally are in the form of, we need 12 million to do this program, and we need an employee to implement it or something. So those can be structured in that way.
Or 12 million to do something, which includes
Includes
blah, blah, blah.
this much for one.
You like that idea? Everybody?
I got it. Then you just like an N word, audit.
Right, otherwise, if they cut it down, it's
Yeah.
like an unfunded mandate.
Yeah, we're gonna go ahead and fund the
Right?
program with no staff.
Get a lot person, you gotta do everything, right?
Oh, please. And everybody else knows that's 41.
Yes.
Yes, and that should probably be fine.
Yeah.
Okay. Then I think we're all agreed that's what we want to ask for next work. Number one.
Yeah.
So many, we have two suggestions, being that second for the recruitment part of the agreement. And see, you all understand.
Don't they know they have to use money for family reference? I know, but if they, if it has. So does that typically come back?
We do all the time and we give it.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, this is like. For something. Creating that part of our. Who wants to go to dinner? Who wants to go to pipeline?
So we got a 2 and a 3, that's what we're trying to decide.
Right. You can go right into the screen.
I would see the 4th.
Okay, we'll do that. Then Amy grabs the 3rd. I'm gonna scratch and file and put that up. And then the 35 million to complete percent capacity in the form. And
And then, Judge, just to update the motion, we'd be including just to add a language to include the FTEs for family rep and for the recruitment and retention piece. On page 3, so on The old, number 2 would be to include 5 FTEs and 5 FTEs to accomplish the work. And then for on number 4 and an FTE for the program.
Yeah,
So
I didn't.
with the change up there, I think the number 2 is increasing the pipeline. I think that's one staff person, correct?
Correct.
So your number 2 would include that one staff
Right.
person. And then on the, what was the number 2 is now the number 3, those additions would be included under that. That was my.
Exactly.
Okay.
Right, so 5 splits up into 2 and 3.
So can you-
That motion?
Judge, I think the motion would be to adopt the following exceptional items as part of TIDC's legislative appropriation request for the next biennium in order of priority, with the first priority being 12 million in general revenue to address the funding shortfall in the fair defense account. The second priority, reduce attorney shortages through a pipeline program consisting of internships, fellowships, and student loan repayment or scholarships, totaling 8.6 million, including a FTE for the work. Third priority, we'd be providing funding to implement TIDC's family protection representation mandate in the amount of $45,662,227, including 5 FTEs for the work. The fourth priority would be 35 million to increase TIDC's public defense capacity through new and expanded public defense offices. The fifth priority would then be if Operation Lone Star funding is not included in the base budget, 41 million to continue the work for OLS.
Very good.
Wow, that was great. I'll make that motion.
Anybody-
I'll second.
Any discussion? It's all in favor. All right, thanks for all the work on that.
Good.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
And
Okay to
with
proceed.
that, the only other item we had on the director's report, pardon me, 2 other items. One is a brief Operation Lone Star update. It's been very mixed during this quarter. April was the second slowest month for representation on Operation Lone Star. However, May then was the second highest month. And June has continued to also see significant numbers of arrests. And Lone Star Defender's Office at this point has been able to provide representation on those cases. They staffed up and added capacity through both the public defender's offices and their panel with the surge we saw last summer, and that has stood them in good stead. They are also in the process of working with OCA to begin providing representation on cases in Brooks County as we're seeing cases start to move in that direction. For the other area we wanted to highlight on OLS is there was a surge of arrests in El Paso County, and we were approached by the county that was considering passing an emergency declaration to seek Operation Lone Star funding from us. At this point, we haven't received a formal funding request or the declaration. If we get anything, we'll be sure to notify the commission. And then the Senate Committee on Border Security held a hearing on OLS on June 11th, and Scott provided a memo updating some of the questions that came up during the hearing to Senator Flores. If anyone would like a copy, we'll be happy to get it to you. And then our last part of the update is our research and data website. Dr. Gamble's been working very hard with TPRI, both on the rural needs assessment. We forwarded the report to everyone late last night, as you know, as part of our discussion for the LAR, and gave us a number of potential avenues to continue our work to serve the needs around the state, including looking at potential legalization. We already have a number of remote members of the team, including myself, that work closely with counties by where they're based, and we'll continue working on that. And then our data website work continues. We are looking at having an updated version of the Indigent Defense Expenditure Report, or IDER, ready to go this fall, which will also work with the updates that were done last fall for the mandatory attorney percentage of practice reporting. Another piece that we're working into that to continue building on the salary survey that was completed earlier this year is an optional piece for public defender's offices and MAC provide us their salary data. And that piece will be required for those counties which currently have improvement grants from TIDC as part of their ongoing grant conditions. That will help us to be sure we keep our data current and can provide the commission the best context possible in reviewing future grant requests.
All right, let's start with grants and reporting. We're still awaiting a report on the fair defense. Fine.
Thank you, sir. I've directed your attention to the memo that's on page 11 of your meeting materials. This is a memo that's circulated on the 14th of June related to some updated revenue projections that PIDC received from the Office of Court Administration regarding the fair defense account. We did review this for those of you who were able to attend the Monday meeting regarding the LAR, but I'm happy to just touch on it again to make sure everybody's up to speed. Essentially, the core issue is that the amounts that the legislature appropriated in the General Appropriations Act include general revenue and also fair defense account funds. Fair defense account funds can only be spent if they are collected. So the amount that the legislature appropriated is based on projections from the comptroller's office. We built our original budget based on the numbers in the General Appropriations Act. However, the revenue is just not coming in where it needs to be in order to support the amount that was appropriated from the fair defense account. If you look at the table that's on page 12, so there are two agencies that are appropriated funds out of the fair defense account, of course, us and then the Office of Capital and Forensic Risk. If you look at the amounts that were appropriated out of the fund, both to us and to OCFW, you see that that totals about 41, just under 41 million for 2024, about 40.5 for 2025. The OCFW benefits are part of that appropriation as well. And then we've got those updated actual collections into the fund. Again, those are projections, revised projections from OCA that were provided to us just recently after we've gotten 2 full quarters of collections. And you see that there is a difference there at the bottom in red. So about $11 million for the biennium based on our current projections or OCA's current projections. And that, of course, was the basis for the first exceptional item that you all discussed. Before I move on, any questions about the general issue? We're going to get into some ideas staff has for how to cope with it, but any questions before I move on? The next couple of sheets in the 3 sheets in the book are regular budget updates. We have the status of our previous budget year, where we still have some open grants on page 14. We have the more detailed revenue collections analysis on page 13. I'm sorry, let me just call to your attention one item on page 13. So what this chart shows, I apologize that it's too small, is that obviously there was a formatting issue there, but the juror pay collections that we've mentioned are reflected in the table that's on the bottom left here. And you'll see that we used to get in FY15, we got almost 7 million and 6.4 in the subsequent year, but nothing in 21, nothing in 22. We got a little bit in 23. We had to wait a long time for it because there's some confusion. But that essentially has dried up. And we really think that that is what is driving this deficit, that revenue source has disappeared, but that disappearance has not been accommodated or analyzed fully when the comptroller provides their projections for how much money is anticipated from it. So the amount that the legislature, I believe, fully intended to give us just isn't all there for that reason.
Do you expect it to gradually go back up as the courts get back to trying more jury cases?
So we were fully expecting that juror pay revenue would recover just as post-COVID in particular, just as the other court costs have bounced back, although not all the way. However, they haven't cannot, and reason has to do with the way the juror fund is appropriated. There's a certain minimum amount of $10 million in the jury service fund. If there is an excess of $10 million at the end of the fiscal year, the excess comes to us. That used to be about $6 million, no longer. One of the things that the legislature just did this past session was they increased juror pay. That needed to happen. But that doesn't account for why this funding disappeared previously, because the legislature just enacted the increase in juror pay. So we don't anticipate this bouncing back in the way that it does not appear to be coming.
How much did they get up to on the 10 million?
So the last time that OCA looked at the current balance of the fund, we're getting toward the end of the fiscal year, there was about 11 million in there. However, we don't ever get juror fund revenue until around October, after they pay all the counties back for the juror pay that went out the door. And so it's really, while there's 11 million kind of currently in the status of the fund, until they settle up with all the counties and get to a year-end number, it's hard to know. So at this point, it appears that the changes related to the jury service fee fund just haven't been incorporated into the projections that were being offered at the elections. So we've got some proposals for how to respond to this. It's of course unwelcome news. There's a budget status on page 15 is just kind of where we are so far for the budget year. We're going to start splitting this by general revenue, which is also called Fund 1, and the fair defense account, which is Fund 5073, just to kind of give you a little more granular detail. But page on 15 is just a regular budget status year to date. I really want to direct your attention to the budget form on page 16, which includes a revision of the budget that we have previously proposed to you based on our appropriations that shows you the impact of the shortfall. So we basically, let me just talk through what we're looking at on page 16 briefly. The first two columns reflect the budget for 2024 and our projections for 2025, using the numbers in the General Appropriations Act for how much TIC had to work with. And if you look there, you'll see in the bottom in green, after we account for the spending, we had about 130,000 in 2024 that was available or unused, so to speak. And then for 2025, we anticipated having about 3.2 million available. And that was money that we were planning to use for new investments and new improvement grant applications that are currently pending. If you look at the last two columns on this page, the numbers at the top highlighted in yellow reflect the revised OCA projections of how much of our fair defense appropriations we actually expect to be able to use, how much is actually going to be coming into the fund. And that's significantly lower. So that without some adjustments here, we would be very much in the red. Let me just talk to you about a few of the things that we're doing here to respond to the shortfall. When the second to the last column, in the revised FY 2024 budget, you see in about the sixth line down, I have a negative number here that I've inserted of 4.325320, which is offsetting some of the what would otherwise be red E. And that reflects current improvement grant awards for this year that we anticipate are not going to be drawn down. The reason being that we've invested in a number of larger programs, big regional public defender offices that are ramping up. They've experienced delays. It's hard to hire and fill all these positions. And so this is kind of one-time savings because of the ramp up of those larger investments that TIDC has made. So that's offsetting some of the ready here based on the actual collections being so low. However, with that and with taking into account a few staff vacancies in our own shop that are temporary one-time savings, we're still in the red for this particular year of the biennium, roughly $1.2 million. You look at the projections for 2025, which is the last column here, you see that at the bottom, you see that we're in the black at about 1.4 million. That's reflecting money that is basically on these assumptions available. And of course, that money would offset the deficit from the current year. We're budgeted in biennial periods. And so while we would be coming up a bit short for 2024, if we have to break some new improvement grants, we can offset the current year's ready with money from 2025 or the same budget period, and leave roughly about a couple $100,000. Now, again, this is based on projections and estimates about certain things like how much of awarded grants won't spend, what will actually happen in terms of collections. We're making a number of projections and estimates here, but we are trying to be conservative and stay out of deficit spending territory for the biennium, and we've provided a proposal that does that based on our best revised estimates of where we stand today. Last point I'll make here is that the revised budgets in the last two columns reflect all of, particularly for FY25's budget, reflect the staff recommendations for continuing grant awards that we're going to be looking at in just a moment. So if all the staff recommendations that are included in the meeting book beyond this page were to be adopted, those figures are reflected in the 2025 budget proposal here. If the commission wanted to go beyond those in certain respects, we would need to perhaps revisit the re-budgeted proposal for 2025 and move some money around in order to accommodate things beyond the staff recommendations. Again, you see there's roughly a couple $100,000 when you take the biennium as a whole that is available based on our current projections. So that's a lot of information. Let me pause there and ask if there are any questions. But this is basically our response to the shortfall and some ways to cope. The biggest way to cope is to tap the brakes on new grant and take care of the continuing grant application. Okay, great. So we're going to pause, shift gears for just a moment and do a quick update on formula grant awards. Toriana, can you just a quick update on where we stand with formula grant special conditions?
Thank you, Edwin. So if I can direct you to page 17 of your meeting notebook for an update on our formula grant special conditions. I will start with the FY22 formula grants. As of this morning, we have 2 counties that are not in compliance with court activity reporting requirements to the Office of Court Administration, which are Zavala and Zapata counties. Just to catch up our new members, these are the grants that we discussed at our last meeting regarding state comptroller budget rules that require any disbursement from a particular year to be made prior to the end of that 3rd following year before the funds are swept. Since then, we have sent both counties grant forfeiture notices reminding them of the comptroller budget rules and that they do have until August 1 to comply with the reporting requirements or their awards will be swept. And we'll update y'all on any progress on that. If there are no questions, I can move on to FY23.
Question. Did we talk about notifying the regional presiding judge about these 2 counties? We did that.
We did discuss that, Judge, and I don't believe I have sent that notice yet. However, I did want to say that I'm optimistic that we're going to be able to get these things addressed based on the most recent information I've received. But I will make sure that the regional providing is notified.
Thanks, Edwin. So as for FY23, the formula grant special conditions, there's a small handful of counties that are not in compliance with court activity reporting requirements to the OCA, and those 13 counties are listed on page 17. TIDC and OCA staff are reaching out to get the reports and/or an approved action plan in place. Are there any questions about that? All right, thanks, y'all.
Thank you, Doriana. Okay, so shifting back to improvement grant territory from formula. On page 18, we have just a summary of the grants and reporting committee meeting that Judge Maderi chaired on Monday afternoon after your great discussion on the LAR. The grants reporting committee came back for more, and I appreciate all their work and attention to, and it should streamline some of the actions to follow today. So we just have a quick summary here of some of the things that were reviewed. So there is a link in the meeting materials for the full grants and reporting committee materials. No action was taken regarding new grant requests. That was at the recommendation of staff for budget shortfall. We do fully plan to revisit this in August with the board, as we get more information coming into the budget. The committee did make a number of recommendations that we'll take up in the subsequent pages in just a few minutes, including improvement grant recommendations to approve continuing improvement grants with no budget changes. There are several that were not in receipt of the committee motion just because of the necessary recusal. And we can just turn to page 19 and jump into the piece of all this. Please feel free to ask me any questions as they come up, but we'll try to move quickly since the agenda is. On page 19, you see a slate of continuing grant requests. These included no budget changes, and these all have a grants and reporting committee motion recommending approval. And committee motion, and these are for new members. Let me just say that when TIDC makes grants, often these grants are have a funding plan of being paid out over 4 years, or they are ongoing sustainability grants. So these are really commitments that the commission has already undertaken to continue funding, but we do make awards year by year, and that's what this slate pieces of. So we do have a committee motion recommending this batch of continuing grants, which is motion number 4.
Committee motion to award the FY 25 continuing grant slate according to the schedule on page 19 of the meeting notebook. This is basically to keep the lights on the things that we're still doing.
This is following through on your current awards.
Right.
And I should note that Mr. Guthrie just mentioned that since Bear County does have a grant, including for his brother and third Spain.
Eric, you
Thank you. Turning to page 20, this is another batch of our continuing grant requests that do have a positive committee motion to recommendation today. This particular slate included some budget adjustments that were necessary for the programs, but they did not include any increases in full-time employees. It was just adjustments, other types of adjustments needed by the various programs. So we do have a committee motion for the slate on page 20, which is motion number 5. Thank you all. On page 21, we see two continuing grant requests that did not include any changes in the budgets. However, Judge Maderi did have to recuse from these in the committee meeting because of her role as regional presiding judge for these two counties that include Nueces and Cameron. We didn't get any negative feedback on these, but just for forum purposes, they don't have a committee motion.
Their motion to award the FY 25 continuing grants.
Second.
Any questions?
Yeah, and I'm just.
Thank you. So the next page, direct your attention to is page 22 of the materials, and you'll see the final slate of continuing grant requests. The reason that the committee decided to hold off on any action until we came to the full board meeting today was because the staff recommendations on these 4 continuing grants do include amounts less than what was requested. And that was essentially for a couple of reasons. In the case of the grant request, continuing request from Potter and to associate with Tom Green, the difference between what was requested by the counties and what staff recommended to the committee and the commission was that we did not believe we should authorize any new full-time employee positions at this juncture, given our budget circumstances and how tight we are with this biennial budget to stay in the. We did support a number of adjustments that did not include expansion of staff. But in the case of Potter and the 2 Tom Green grants, we did, staff did recommend because of that reason, not to include the new FTEs. The other continuing request where the staff recommendation was less than the county's request was for Culberson. Culberson is the host county for the Far West Texas Regional Public Defender Office, We serve the 5 counties immediately to the east of El Paso in the Big Bend region. The main reason that, and really the only element of the request that the staff didn't recommend was just because of the policy regarding sustainability grant reimbursement percentages. So the counties, and we have a number of representatives from the participating counties who are here today, and I'm sure would like to say a few words to the commission about their request. They're currently just under 70% reimbursement rate. That has to do with the history of the funding of the program over the years. It's a shade above the 2/3 standard for sustainability grants, but their baseline rate is just under 70%. They are asking for the commission to consider reimbursing them to 80% on an ongoing basis. And I can let them speak to the need for that. The other elements of the proposal were recommended by staff. They include a number of adjustments. Let me just break down some of the other things beyond the request for 80% reimbursement. The increase this year also includes a 5% cost of living adjustment for the program staff, which according to the policies the commission recently adopted, would be presumptively approved. It does also include moving a couple of positions that had been funded under the ARPA grant and the special mental health grant, 2-year grant that the commission awarded a couple of years ago. That funding that didn't include a match has expired or is expiring. And so the counties are taking on partial match this year. That is new this year for them. We also have included here an indirect line item. The program has not had an indirect cost budget line item previously. It's a very small county that serves as the host of this program. And there have been a number of challenges with the administrative infrastructure in the county to keep up with a very large grant. So they are requesting a 5% indirect rate, which we have done with some of our other, some modest percentage indirect rate, with some of our other sustainability grants to help the county offset the administrative burden of handling the 5 county programs. They certainly, I strongly recommend that is a very significant need, and that was part of the staff recommendation to include that indirect. There's also a small adjustment, reclassifying one of the employees that has taken on substantially more responsibility. That's a very minor part of this. And then, of course, the budget now includes the full cost of office space rental. So there are a number of moving parts that account for the requested increase here. But the one in particular that was novel was reimbursing 80% on an ongoing basis, which deviated from our standard sustainability grant program, and that is why we held off when folks are here today. So I can answer any questions, or we can turn over to our visitors who might want to speak to this item.
You got any questions at this time? So why don't we bring up our visitors and questions?
So Mr. McDermott is the chief public defender, and I believe has several of our county judges, big delegation from far west Texas. Mr. McDermott, do you want to?
Thank you. I'd like to introduce Judge Greg Henderson, who's county judge of Brewster County, Judge Joanne McKenzie, who's the county judge of Huntsville County, Judge Bill Portillo, who's the county judge of Presidio County, and Judge Evans, who is the county judge of Jack Davis County. Judge Arias of Culberson County is not with us today because he's been ill, lingering effects of a really bad COVID infection from the beginning of the pandemic, and he's not able to travel this month, but he did want to do it. Our counties are poor. I'm just going to start that. There's no doubt. We're just poor. We have tried cases in my county in courtrooms that don't have air conditioning or heating. We've tried cases with no resources. Judge Keller earlier during the year LR discussion talked about leaving counties have skin in the game. My counties are definitely willing and definitely have been giving skin in the game. There's no skin left in my counties. There's just none left. There was some discussion that was raised. I'm going to let the counties themselves talk about their financial situation before going to hear. We have county budgets that range from $3 million to $8 million for the indirect cost issue. The budget of my office represents about 1/3 of the total county budget. And that's why we break the infrastructure of the county. I want to address two of the issues that Judge Maderi and Judge Keller brought up at the committee meeting on Monday. And one was an issue about staffing and needs for staffing. We currently have 1,350 open cases, 950 of those are felons. If we were following CIDC caseload guidelines at this point, we would need about, I think, 11 lawyers, 9 felony lawyers, and 2 misdemeanor lawyers. We are not following caseload guidelines, and we are not asking to. We in part have been able to build a program that I think is very successful and efficient based on relying on non-attorney staff for cost savings in order to handle the cases. It is a model we've recently hired a 30-year lawyer in the office. He has been very unused to because in a lot of ways our non-attorneys keep the cases moving and keep the clients informed and review the discovery. And that has allowed us to invest in considerable cost savings by not needing to hire lawyers in order to do work that we can have, that we can train non-lawyers to do. There was another question about office space and about rent. And I think that's important. Where we live, there is nothing. In fact, although we have a good portion of burned down over Memorial Day weekend, there was a large fire downtown that took out a significant section of some historic buildings. When we looked around last fall for office space, and we have been receiving free office space in Brewster County for 6 years with no contribution. For them, it was a total in-kind contribution from the county. And that office space was about 700 square feet for an entire staff of about 11 staff. And so at some point it became we couldn't have confidential communications. We couldn't have confidential phone calls in our office in order to just to fit. When I looked around at office space in Brewster County, we came up with basically nothing. And so we got what was available and was being able to invest in it. But there was a question about availability of office space and other kinds of institutions. As all of you know, it is important for us to meet with clients in person. Having office space that clients come to in person in a small community like Alpine means that there are significant restrictions on what is available and whether we can have certain kinds of clients with certain bond conditions or restrictions on their liberty to actually visit in those office spaces. And so we ended up with basically one option. And that was it. The situation we're in now is that I believe that we are doing the maximum that we can with the minimum that we can afford to do. We are squeezing every efficiency out of the system that's possible. The counties can't afford. They just flat out can't afford, and I'll let them talk about that. But we heard earlier today about the issue with rural lawyers. The counties can't afford not to have us either. We have gotten there are no new practitioners in my 5 counties since I have opened this office 7 years ago who are taking injured investments, who are taking appointments. The only lawyers who have come to the area that are taking appointments are working for my office. That includes basically every lawyer under the age of 40 that is in our region has worked for me. There's no alternative. I believe the appointment list for felonies in 3 of my counties and Brewster, Presidio, and Jeff Davis includes 2 lawyers, both of whom put significant limits on the caseloads that they're trying to carry because they're busy. We also have a very busy federal court in the region. In Hudspeth and Culbertson counties, I believe we have right now outside of my office 1 lawyer on the appointment list. And there are some other lawyers who are residents, but I know that Judge McKenzie has talked to 2 lawyers who live in her county, 1 lawyer who lives in her county, who is unwilling even to be the county attorney. 2 of my counties do not have a lawyer who's willing to be county attorney. Jeff Davis County has a county attorney who was appointed recently and has to run by statute, and has not yet filed to run for county attorney. And so they don't know what they're doing. And so that's the situation we're in. My counties are squeezed and squeezed. I am very appreciative. I have never had the county judges come to this meeting with me before. They have never had to show support from the county judges, and I'm really, really asking that y'all listen and make the exception for us. And I'll look at the.
Thank you, James. I'm Brewster County, Brad Hennings, I'm county judge there. And I have to, as a Texan, I always say when I go to these conferences, I always tell people we're the largest county in Texas. It's 6,200 square miles. I fail to tell everybody, 10,000 people. But we depend on folks like you to come visit our counties, get a big national parks, completely housed in Brewster County, and so we.
Can you come up just a little bit so everybody can hear you?
We get about 600,000 visitors to our county from tourism, and then obviously a large number of visitors to our county through immigration. A couple of things I will tell you. Last year we were at 85,000 in fiscal 23. We went this year to 165,000 funding, so we doubled the funding. This year, at the rate we're going to be at 200,000. So that's becoming very difficult for us in terms of dollars. Now, we have about a $10 million budget. So my argument to you guys, and I thank you for your work. I appreciate it. This is a very important issue. Totally agree with your comments earlier. Very important issue. I would ask that you guys, you have a huge challenge in new mandates, but I would ask you that those that have boots on the ground that are doing the job now, keep funded. Thank you very much.
Good morning. I'm County Judge from Smith County, Rand McKenzie, and I reiterate our thanks and gratitude in the words of Representative Moody as well. My county, we're the third largest at 4,500 square miles. We have 3,200 people. I took office in 2023, and just to read some facts, my first 45 days in office, we had to cash $1.25 million CD to meet payroll. Our revenue is going down while our costs are going up. Our district courts used to bring in $400,000 or $500,000 a year. They're bringing in, right now they're at 18,000. My courts bring in more than my combined district courts. I've got a county jail that services 6 other counties. That's costing me $1 million a year. We're going over budget, $800,000 to $1 million a year. I think on top of that, what happened starting in 2022 is migrant issues. You know, we are 100 miles of the border, and we had more migrant deaths than we did COVID deaths. And we're sitting on these bodies, we're paying for these bodies, we're trying to work with consulates. So the costs just keep growing and growing and growing for people outside of the county. Right now, and speaking to Mr. McDermott, I think the only reason why the office has succeeded is because of his personal passion in this and working with less. They take on about 400 cases. We're known as the drug courts at 2 checkpoints in my county.
Joey Nelson was arrested.
Like there's a whole litany of celebrities that come around the corner and forget that we do have a checkpoint. But I know
Don't get the good concert.
just having in a misdemeanor, it cost about $750 for dismissal for a misdemeanor class A. You couple that with 400 cases a year, just a misdemeanor, so it's $300,000. I can't do it. I understand everybody's got deficits and these unfunded mandates, but we're just meeting people's basic rights. And we're asking for your help, and I've committed to continue to bring in revenue to my county. I brought in revenue streams we've never seen. I'm bringing in grants where we've never seen to offset a lot of these costs, but it's going to take me a couple of years to really make that work. So I'll move on. I know that you've got another joke this year, but I appreciate your time and consideration and your own passion to make this as well.
What Judge McKenzie didn't mention, Judge, any kids mentioned yet, but I'll pass over to Judge Evans. There is a lot of untaxed programs. So a lot of land that it just is not. Please.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. I'm Curtis Evans, County Judge, Jeff Davis. And I really appreciate you giving us the time to hear us and hopefully understand our plight as far as being in rural Texas. We do not have an airport. There's nothing. Everybody travels mostly by car to us or across the border by foot. We're constantly dealing with not our own people, it's more people coming through, that's what is really hurting us. We don't have the staff, we don't have the resources. In my county, I wish I could tax McDonald Observatory because we would be completely wealthy if they pay nothing but all our tourists come in. It's just, we're chasing our tail. I have a little over $2 million budget. $9,000 affects us dramatically. Any kind of a raise in our county. You look at the little lady going to the grocery store, she's having a hard time. So, $100 hurt. Anyway, I really do appreciate your time and consideration in order to help us out and fund these courses, because James does a wonderful job working. He's excellent, and we're fortunate to have him. So, and thank you.
Judge, you didn't mention your square miles. What is that, 26?
I got 2,200 square miles of mountains, and if you roll it out, it'd be bigger than Brewster
Said what they would do in their Presidio County. There are 200, God bless Texas, there are 254 counties in Texas. I have the unfortunate designation of having a person. So I operate with a budget of 1 million. I'm currently at it running in the red about 10%. I need more officers. I put today one horse town, one ambulance county. It's a tough place to be. So again, and I could sit here, I have a median income of 21.5. 48% of my people are on some sort of food assistance. So again, I guess we could all just sit here and pat each other on the back and stuff. I know you guys have the tough decisions to make. Please take into account rural Texas. In rural Texas with oil, it's a whole different animal. We don't have oil, we have gas, we have dirt, we have rocks, we have mountains. Loving County, for example, Loving County is the smallest county in Texas. It has 67 residents. Their budget is $25 million. They have one. We don't have it. Which we can sometimes we wish we did. It brings its own problems, but we just don't have oil and gas money. We have revenues. We're good clean folks, and we need to go back and ask them for another make this happen. But again, to your point, Mr. Lee, thank you very much. It was a pleasure to hear you talk very eloquent. Because you're exactly right. I'm a retired captain with the state police. I was a trooper, I was an investigator, I was a lieutenant, I was a captain, I retired right there in Boston. But I use those words in anything. I'm sure I was right to deciding that I'd like to have a attorney. If you can't afford it, thank you.
Thank you. We emphasize again, none of our counties have the oil and gas and the mineral rights that other counties do, and I would like to emphasize just here that Judge Bertillo, who is a former law enforcement officer in the county prosecution, when he took office, was concerned to me and my judge, who reflexively doesn't believe in my project. The first thing he said to me was exactly what he said to y'all today, which was what he said over and over again in his career: was you have a right to be silent, you have a right to an attorney, and he believes in the Constitution, and really wants to do this. Judge Bertillo's county is the one that has no airconditioning in the PA. We have tried cases in that courtroom at 100 degrees inside. We've tried cases in that courtroom at 34 degrees inside. And so I don't know if I have anything else to say. I think it's been said more eloquently by the people who are actually running the budgets, and thank you for your consideration.
Thank you again, Joe. Appreciate you guys.
Thank you.
Simon the Gates.
Oh.
Different. You can break down the various elements of the cost. So, just to put some context, I want to also thank all the judges for coming to be here today and to help us understand the circumstances they're operating in. Because there were several aspects that I touched on at the beginning of my presentation of this issue, I just wanted to put some dollar figures to the various elements for the commission's consideration. The one that was not included in the staff recommendation, just because of the existing policy on sustainability funding, was the move to 80%. That amount is roughly $135,000, I believe. 10% of the total budget. So just for context, that aspect of the request that was not included. I think that actually that accounts for the entirety of the difference between the staff recommendation and the requested amount that is right next to it in the table on page 22. The only other item that I would mention that the commission may want to consider in this context, the indirect cost line item that is intended to provide some support for the administrative burden of covering a very complicated multi-county program that is an outsized part of the Culberson County budget. It dwarfs pretty much the entire rest of the budget. Typically, if an indirect cost line item is included and it is a match situation where there is any kind of cost sharing, those costs are real costs. It's just that they're not allocated in particular. They are real costs of the program. And so the match would apply to the indirect costs typically, just as it would apply to the regular costs. Under the circumstances, I believe the request, and I just touched on this with Mr. McDermott before the meeting, the intention of the request was to fully fund the indirect line item and not have a cost sharing component for that support that the commission might consider offering for the administrative burden to Culberson County. So the cost of that is roughly $25,000 if the commission were to approve the indirect rate in full, is included in the cost sharing.
All right, well.
So, let me understand, the 415,000 revenue is not including the 80%. That's all the things over here on the side,
That's
But not the 80%.
but not the 80%.
Oh, no, it does, the 415, the requested increase does include the 80%.
But the final on the far right is.
The recommendation in bold includes everything but the 80%.
Which is what, like 127,000?
Yeah, about 130.
Taken away.
About 130. The difference between going to from their current reimbursement rate to the one that the 80% that they're requesting is exactly is the difference between the 1.336 and the 1.16.
So the issue that we were, so for the ones that were not here the other day when we had our meeting, you know, they make a very compelling case, right? I mean, this is something that is very compelling. What TIDC was worried about is, you know, what is good for the goose is good for the gander kind of thing, right? Where we are allowing it for one area and then not allowing it for everyone else. And we're wondering if the floodgates are going to be opening up and everybody else coming in. And so, you know, we kind of talked, and I think we'll hear more about it in August, about having counties have a little bit more, you know, skin in the game. But also, if you've got a county that is, you know, very wealthy county, right, versus a county that is not very wealthy, or counties that are not very wealthy, maybe that is something in the future that the IDC should take into consideration. We haven't really done anything on it. That was just kind of our thing, is we brought back all of them. We got stuck on Far West Texas, RPDO. And so then we decided to bring all of them back that didn't give us, that we cut some out. So that's kind of where we are right now.
So the committee motion is not for the full thing.
We don't have a committee motion on these.
Okay.
There's something to add about the 80%.
Just on what Judge Maderi was referencing, I brought up earlier that our research directors already reached out to PPRI, and they think there may be potential framework, and they can give at least a high-level discussion in August, and then depending on the board's direction, could have some recommendations in December to go into the FY25 sustainability guidelines moving forward.
Want to separate out these items from the 80% and just vote on it?
If that's what the board wants to do, I mean, we can separate it, everything right now except that 80, going to 80%. And then have to vote on that. Actually, we could do it for all of them. Except for the ones that they're, the ones that were not included in the other things. Okay,
But as far as the, colors and.
for all of them, right? So let's do a motion then.
So the suggestion was that we vote on the far right column, and we could revisit different
In our.
okay. But not, oh, not at all.
So the staff recommendations in the bold rightmost column do not include the 80%, but they do include everything.
Well, and it's, yeah, and it's also with everything else here too. We've taken out everything that you all said no to for staff recommendation.
That's right.
So I think what we should do, and Alex, is to be able to vote for this, whatever this column is, the recommended FY 25 award as is, and then bring it back on our August meeting where we have something that we can do it, and hopefully we can help, these counties out. But at least we can approve what we all kind of approved right now, or we're thinking we are approving. Does anybody have any other discussion on that? Alex? Representative Moody, anybody?
I just want to give, I mean, my entire budget, I'm the public defender for Harris County, my budget is bigger than all of your entire budget.
Yeah, I think all of it, yeah. Yeah, there.
My county doesn't want to let.
Bring your checkbook out.
Well, I think that Judge Maderi's suggestion is consistent with the kind of tight margin in the projections that I shared with you earlier. In August, we are going to have more information. In August, we're trying to be conservative here, given the unknowns.
Right.
Things are going to come in, actuals are going to come in, and we will have better visibility for you to have some comfort level should you want to approve that. I mean, I hate to get ahead of myself, but I would be reasonably optimistic that there's going to be some additional room that opens up that would provide you with more confidence that you're staying within the lines.
So then I would make a motion, if there's no other discussion, I'm gonna make a motion to have Bill make the motion because he's so eloquent. But I'd like to approve staff recommendations on page 22 for Potter County, Culberson, Tom Green, and have them approved as state or staff recommendations. And then I would also make a motion to, in that same motion, move this back to August, where we can reconsider the extra of the 80%. And the other, we've got 4 of them, but they're asking for more. Or we'll have more.
The other request.
Yeah,
I'll say.
all in favor?
Aye.
All right, that passes.
Thank you all for very good discussion. And again, thank you all to.
Y'all, thank you very much. And I promise you, we will, I mean, we hear you, right? I mean, we really did. We hear you. And so we'd like to be able to reconsider this in August when we have a better, idea what we're doing and where we are. Okay. But thank you all very much for coming in. Yep.
Before we move on, and thank you all. I commiserate on the journey from West Texas, although I do have the luxury of an airport in El Paso. So, but I get to drive through your fine counties very often. So thank you all. I know the trip is hard. My kids love going out there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just a quick, and I apologize that I'm going to actually have to go catch a flight because the flight schedules are not fantastic today. And I was a little bit behind today. I typically don't have any comments on minutes, and I'm not trying to open back up the discussion from earlier in the day. But I did note, and maybe going forward, I did note on the El Paso item, we've identified that case by the name of the attacker. in the Walmart shooting. I would ask going forward that we not use that name. His intention was notoriety and to be known for what he did. We took great pains in the Uvalde investigation to never utilize the name of the attacker. We refer to him solely as the attacker. There are federal guidelines on that, best practices when we talk about these incidents. So I would just ask as going forward, and these are state documents, if we refer to that as the El Paso mass shooting or the Walmart mass shooting or some other indication of the name. I do know that is the defendant's name. I'm aware of that, but we have a choice that we can make in the way we identify it. So like I said, don't want to open that. It was my fault for being late to not weigh in on that earlier. And so that's my fault. But going forward, if that's something that we could.
I think we can fix it right now. I'm gonna make a motion to amend the minutes that we had and to use the word, how did you want it to be put in there?
El Paso mass shooting
Okay.
case.
I'm gonna make a motion to amend the meeting, the minutes and approve them.
Second.
All in
Thank
favor?
Aye.
And I appreciate that. And I don't mean to belabor that point, but it is something that is, I think is critical when we talk about these issues. And I thank you all for everything.
Thank you.
Safe travel.
We're almost done. Great discussion, thank you. The items on page 48 are two continuing grant requests that just weren't quite ready for us to continue, but that we are anticipating coming in. These are both have a issue of the ARPA grant running out and what is the subsequent grant need to take account of, and we can have that discussion in August. The items on page 48 are just information, and we'll revisit those continuing grants with you in August. They are penciled into the planning budget that I've shared and discussed with you earlier. Page 49, minor housekeeping matter related to Kaufman County's grant. We have a committee motion. Number
13.
number
No,
13.
pardon me, number 12.
I'm sorry, motion number 12.
Any motion, is there any discussion? On favor?
Item 50 is a summary of the modification to the current grant for the Lone Star Defender Organization that is performing or that is handling the Operation Lone Star Indigent Defense Program with TADC's funding. The grant is being amended to augment the 2025 budget for the public defender line item and public defender to maintain the need capacity to ensure that counsel will be available. It also includes an increase, substantial increase in the grant to cover the assumption of financial obligations in the form of outstanding private attorney vouchers primarily that are being assumed by this new organization from the original corporate organization that provided this service last biennium. That was the Lubbock Private Defender Organization. These changes are largely related to the organizational restructuring. All of this funding is GR. It's all not impacted by our other issues, and we are bringing forward some funding that was unused from the previous biennium to finance this proposal. Have a committee motion. It's number 13.
Any discussion? On favor? Any opposed?
Thank you all. Page 56 is something that we didn't touch on in the grants reporting committee meeting, but it really is essentially housekeeping. As you'll recall, the legislature gave TADC $614 million of American Rescue Plan Act funds. We granted that money out to counties. These are federal funds that are passing through the Office of the Governor and TADC. We got our grants out. We want to make sure that the counties have ample time to spend these resources before they have to start dipping in state funds and their own county funds. And so this just gives us the ability to expend the terms of their grants to give them the time needed to fully access those funds.
Okay.
On page 57, we haven't given much attention today to the new grant request that we did receive and that we have recommended at staff level to hit the pause button on. This is a painful thing for staff because we have been working closely with several of these grant applicants to move these programs forward. At this juncture, you saw the math is tight. We're hoping things improve, and we will be revisiting all these in more detail with you in August. even if nothing else, to preview some of the programs that we believe should be first in line when resource situation improves, which I'm optimistic it will. So this is just 57 is for, page 57 is provided for information purposes. You can see what the requests are, and we will revisit those in detail with you in August. Page 58 is we do have a committee motion. There's a section of the required defense expenditure report that is really no longer serving any purpose in terms of collecting useful data. In the process of our technology project to streamline the report, we've identified it as unnecessary and are just recommending that we delete this particular small section that is underutilized. Anyway, thank you very much. We're going to go now to fiscal monitoring, and I'll turn it over to Doug.
Yes, y'all, I've got to run, so I apologize. Thank you again, Bentella, for everything, and see you all back here in August. Well,
Thank you,
see a lot of y'all before that.
Okay, so the fiscal monitoring report can be found on pages 59 through 65. Here I've listed all the activities for the fiscal year, which began in September, but just to summarize the activities since April, I began 3 new reviews. Those were to Peel, Limestone, and McLennan counties. I did go on site on those those reviews and visit with those counties. That was really productive meetings with them. The reviews are ongoing at this time. I'm still working on documentation and report writing for those. I was able to get the Potter and Randall County reports written up for that reviews that were started the previous quarter. And then the Upshur County report, we did get a response from them, so I was able to get a final report issued to Upshur County. Additionally, I have 10 counties submitted their comprehensive annual financial reports and single audits since the April board meeting. I noted that 3 counties, Bee, Bear, and Travis County, had PIBC funds selected for the single audit review. And I'm happy to report that there were no findings on or any compliance issues with any of those committees. And that's basically all I have at this point.
You can see improvement. And I'll be very brief. Linda and I have been working with Edwin and Chris Bound and our partners at Lone Star Defender's Office, Texas Rio Grande Public Defenders, and Neighborhood Defender Services to be sure that individuals arrested under Operation Lone Star receive constitutionally effective counsel and that we have adequate resources for it. As I mentioned earlier, the work that Amrutha and her team at Lone Star Defenders did last summer has ensured we have sufficient capacity to meet the current number of individuals coming through and to be sure that they are getting counsel timely and to receive effective representation. Linda also went to Eagle Pass with Amrutha earlier in May and met with the staff at the Maverick County District Court, the county judge, and Texas Rio Grande Public Defenders local Maverick office to look at how things are working, how we can facilitate smoother operations, and had a very productive trip and great conversations with everyone. We've had another busy quarter on planning studies. We prepared an updated planning study for the Wharton County, which would comprise Wharton and Matagorda in a potential regional public defender's office. We did an update for the Northeast Texas with Bowie and their work to get new partners in to turn that office into a regional public defender's office. And we had a virtual meeting with Galveston on the MAC planning study we prepared earlier this year. We continue to work with High Plains as they're getting their office up and running, and our thanks are to Natasha for her work on that. And then Natasha and Ashley are working on another part of our technical assistance to public defenders offices and MAC, developing a board guide for launching offices, and then a chief's toolbox to deal with all the issues that someone coming into the role of chief may not be aware of as they start working with counties and their systems. We have just completed interviews for our 5th class of the FIDDLE program, and we'll be notifying nominees or participants in the next couple of weeks. The fifth class will happen here in Austin in October. And we also had our first Texas class graduate in March, and or April, and I want to recognize Ashley Daly Garza on our team, who is a member of that class of graduates. We had a JTIP training in April. And then one other item that's come out of Dr. Gamble's work is we're building on the new officials outreach we started last year to make that more effective with the data website update. And part of that discussion was expanding it to not just district judges, administrative and county judges, as well as the auditors, to include all judges in a jurisdiction, the JPs, the county court at law judges, all the district judges, and evolve into a newsletter. We hope to have samples of the quarterly newsletter for the August meeting. And then we've continued our work doing trainings with the Justice Courts Training Center. They're listed in the report. And then Kristen, could you give us a really quick highlight on our recruitment work this quarter?
Sure thing. Hi, everybody. Recruitment, we have just announced the public defense days for law schools across the state of Texas for fall 2024. We are reaching out to those law schools right now and are getting dates for those schools so we can bring public defenders and private counsel that are taking these kind of appointed cases and bring them to the law students to talk about the work. We also, at the Rusty Duncan Criminal Law Conference that is hosted by the Texas Indigent Defense Commission, we led our Public Defense Leaders Day. At that day, we talked with them about not just recruitment, but also retention, other topics there. We had a great set of 2 panels from our current leadership here in public defense, and so that was a wonderful time as well. And we also tabled at that conference, and we were able to talk and meet with practitioners who are already in the criminal space to talk about what TIDC does and also the opportunities for them to get involved.
Thank you. That's the information.
Next.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bunning. On page 68, you can see a summary about some of our recent policy monitoring activities. Since the April meeting, we've issued 2 monitoring reports and we've received responses from 3 counties. We also have a number of counties for which we have not yet issued a report, but we expect to do so in the very near future. As to those 3 counties that have responded to our reports, first of all, we had Dallas County. This review came after request of Commissioner John Wiley Price. It was not our typical review. He asked us to look at some particular items, that is whether Dallas County is following Article 26.04 F of the Code of Criminal Procedure dealing with priority of appointments to the public defender office. He was specifically looking at capital cases and appeal cases. Our report made 3 findings, all dealing with capital. Dallas County responded last week, and we need to get back in touch with them. But before we do so, we want to seek guidance from the PNS committee. We will not do that today, but you'll get an email for us asking for your thoughts. And, so that's Dallas. As far as Kendall County, this was a follow-up review. Our initial review made 7 findings. They addressed 6 of them, and I expect that they'll close out the final issue when we go back. And then we had Waller County. This was a review that originally came out at request of several elected officials after the Sandra Bland tragedy. Their initial report made 8 findings. We're down to 3 now. And I'm very hopeful that we can close it out when we go back. I think that Judge Woolley has helped us out and maybe addressing those findings. All right, well, thank you, Judge. Let's skip ahead to complaints. I don't believe we're talking about. Oh, we got it. Okay, go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Natalie Ferguson. I'm filling in for Natasha Birch. I'm available to speaking briefly on complaints. The bottom line on page 73 of the notebook is that we have experienced a significant increase in complaints since June of 2023. In the spring, we began accepting family protection complaints. They represent only a very small fraction of municipal rates that we receive. So the increase is not attributable to family protection. While the reason for this is unclear, it's pretty obviously not family protection. There are some options that we have going forward. But that's the bottom line. I have one small point of clarification for the board materials on page 73, and I apologize for that. It states that the board authorized contacting the family hotline. That's not what happened at our last board meeting, but the board didn't have a discussion about who to contact, only approval that TIDC would accept family protection complaints. The only organization that we've reached out to is the Texas Family Hotline regarding the fact that we're accepting family. That's a free legal service for anyone with questions about CPS, and it doesn't seem to have contributed much to the complaint.
I'm glad you said that because I read that.
Apologize for that. Yeah, the takeaway is that our complaint dispatch is experiencing significant increases, but not.
So we need to look at that. I mean, that we're not a complaint taking organization. We want help with the complaint, but we don't. Typically in the past, that we don't want to. So if it keeps going up.
We have a few ideas that good.
Well, last one. Thanks for hanging in there, everyone. I'll keep it very brief. We've already talked about spending for family protection. I won't go over that again. We are, in the midst of data collection. As of June 8th, when this report was written, 245 counties had submitted their family protection plans, which are due every 2 years. So that's a pretty good number considering we were the first launch of the new website. So we were the guinea pigs. There were some bugs to be expected, some things we had to get over, but I think we still had some pretty good engagement considering we did a whole new website. I do anticipate that we will have a full data report for y'all at the August board meeting to review. Now that TIDC has full authority over family protection representation, the reports can come straight from the board. In previous years, they went through the judicial council, so they'll just get to come right from you. And I do think that a lot of the information in that report will be strong evidence of why our LAR is necessary and will help support our request. As far as Title IV goes, I briefly mentioned this earlier. We last met with the Department of Family and Protective Services on May 22nd to talk about Title IV and how we can help support that process. Y'all may remember last board meeting, the board approved allowing TIDC staff to negotiate with the department to come up with an MOU to figure out a way for us to provide more administrative support. We have met with the department. We've looked at their current process to understand better how it's working. I think that's step one of understanding how we can make it better. So we have a good handle of how it's working. We have some thoughts of ways we can move forward, potentially upgrading our website, making a better efficient system. We don't have an MOU yet. Obviously, that's a big deal to get that huge agency to work with us, but they've been very helpful and open, and maybe we'll have one for you in August to consider. Hopefully, we think we might be able to get there, but we're moving forward there. Another really exciting development is we have launched our mentorship program. So one of the things we wanted to do that we thought we could do without a lot of money was to create a mentorship program for attorneys who take appointments of children and parents in CPS cases. Right now, it'll be very kind of low budget, just using Zoom and tech and things that we can do. Applications have gone out. They are due July 8th. We can expand that if we need more people. Natalie Corvington is heading on up. She's doing an awesome job. So we're really excited to start the first phase of that. I've got some future projects I'd like to bring before the board. I don't believe these necessitate a full motion, but I did want to just bring them to you before we started doing anything. The Child Protection Law section and the Children's Commission have both approached us and asked if these are things that maybe we could work on because they are very specifically targeted on attorneys for kids and parents. One of them would be to create just a general list of appellate attorneys who handle family protection representation appeals. The need for attorneys is everywhere, frankly, but also in appeals. And occasionally there are times when judges need an appellate lawyer and they don't have one in their county. They don't necessarily know where to go. There's anecdotal information that maybe the list is only about 20 lawyers in our state that handle these appeals. But those groups have asked if there's a way that we can just keep a list. It wouldn't be any kind of endorsement. It's really just a list of this is who takes them. So if the judge needs to find someone, they can. Another project we've been asked to lead would be to assisting judges who are looking for attorneys to join their list. So this would be solely based on the judges wanting to participate, but we would reach out to CPS judges, ask them, do y'all need help? And then putting together easy to use informational packets for how people can join their list, getting those out to all the law schools, any bar associations potentially, just kind of helping them spread the word for how to join their list for anyone who might be interested. And then another project we've been asked to do would be to begin running really large statewide collaborative groups of attorneys who handle these appointments. Right now, our system is basically assigned counsel, and especially in rural communities, like we've heard, people may be feeling very isolated. So this would be just building a community. We haven't even started really figuring out how we would do this, but it would be a way to connect people and get people talking and building more of a community than we currently have. Both the Child Protection Law section and the Children's Commission feel that because they're supposed to cover all of it, including state's attorneys, that it would be better for us to handle these projects because they would be solely focused on attorneys for children and parents. So that's what we've been asked to do. I think they're good ideas, but I didn't want to start anything before I mentioned it to y'all.
Something to me, doing a lot. So, do we need to ask for more FTEs in our own? Because obviously you can't keep it on.
Well, hopefully we'll get the 5.
But do we, I mean, we do need to ask more FTEs, right?
We've got.
There's 5 that were included in the previous discussion you all have done.
I've got. It's just. Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, next meeting, August. You know when?
Yes. August 28th.
28.
Meeting. Any business? Public comment? That was all. Okay, we have adjourned. Thank you all. That's a lot of work. Thank you.